am now.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome to the GR Pod Week 2. We've got all of our experts on the phone, and more of us back in Craftsbury land where it is raining and icy. We had an exciting weekend of racing. This cross country, it was in Lillehammer, and IBU World Cup, IBU BMW World Cup, in fact, was in Ostersund, Sweden, where Jake was racing. So we have a local reporter on the ground. I wish he was trailside to talk to some of the athletes on the traveling microphone, but maybe he did that while he was out there. Today we're just going to discuss some various ideas, some reflections on the races we watched, the races we experienced. I guess I'll start. One of my things that I really enjoyed this weekend, which maybe happens a lot and I just didn't notice it, but there was just especially in the biathlon pursuit races, a lot of countries were represented at the top. And that was something that really excited me, especially kind of after some of the like Russia-Norway showdowns in cross country last weekend, where you didn't really see anybody going at it. In the men's pursuit this weekend in Ostersund, there were 8 different nations in the top 10. And I think in the women, there were 7 different nations represented in the top 10. And I think that's something that IBU does really well, or it seems like there's just a variety of talent. It's not just like Norway fighting it out at the top. And I don't know if that's different than other years, but I just really enjoyed, especially in that men's pursuit, it was like top French guy, top Swedish guy, top Norway guy out in the lead in kind of the battle of the nations. So I don't know if other people experience that or what thoughts are on that, if anyone has anything to share.
I mean, this is part of a larger ongoing discussion in cross country and in biathlon. And I think that the international governing bodies, this is not news to them. IBU does a really good job of bringing on developing nations. Like last week, there was an IBU development camp where athletes from sort of developing nations came and had sessions with European national team coaches. Laura Dahlmeyer was there. They got her to come and coach. I mean, FIS does a summer development camp in Norway, but I just think that IBU has invested a lot more in developing nations and bringing nations who have traditionally less expertise and less resources and bringing them along. And I think that's really borne out, especially on relay days, as you cited, where you have the number of nations starting in like a biathlon mixed relay is way, way, way more than a cross country relay day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that, FIS to fill out more of a field allows teams to have 2 relay teams. Which
can you imagine if IBU did that? That would be something.
That would be insane.
I don't think it'd even be possible because you only have 30 points. I mean, you already have 27 relay teams even in the single gender relays. It's crazy.
Maybe it needs to be the mega relay mass start,
Yeah, the mass start 6 for relay teams.
Yeah, that would be wild.
I mean, I do like the idea that like for FIS, more athletes get to race, but it just seems like when all you see on the podium are the same, Russia, Norway, Sweden, and then both, they could have 2 teams on the podium. I think it sort of takes away from, again, what Raleigh said with like developing smaller nations and growing the sport.
Yeah, although having 2 teams from the same country for me sometimes just makes the like result sheet a little bit fun, because like in the men's relay this weekend at Lillehammer, we had Russia 2 beat Russia 1, and I just really am curious what that like team dynamic is. Like they're the freaking underdogs, Russia 2, and like what are they like smack talking in the locker room before, after? They're like, I want to know what that's like, and I think that's great. Yeah.
I was wondering that same thing when I saw that, and I saw Ustiagava anchored that Russia too. So I imagine that felt good for him after probably feeling maybe like he was snubbed on Russia 1. But did you guys see that race? Because I didn't, but I looked at the results and it looked very, very close. It must have come down to a sprint, I imagine.
Luke?
Yeah, I like on the Russia 2, not the first time that Russia 2 has beat Russia 1. And like Russia as a nation really, really struggles with selection. on the cross country side, on the biathlon side, everything. Like it's like, the NBA team where people talk about, like, or the college basketball team, like, who's their best player, who are they starting, and I think that more this year than in years past, the Russians don't really know, because they have, I don't know if you're aware, but like the way the Russian national team is set up for cross country and biathlon, they have different training groups for men and women, different coaches, different plans. They have a lot of people, and they have their sort of stalwart stars that have done it in the past. But the next generation is really nipping along, and it's a super political process in Russia. There's like for biathlon, there's like a 25 person like coaches conference that happens to pick who goes to which IBU race, and their selection before World Cup 1 was wild because they had a guy qualify for the World Cup that didn't race any IBU last year. So he couldn't start the World Cup, so he had to go to the IBU Cup. So they took the next guy up, which is the younger Russian guy who I can't remember his name. Anyway,
Daniel,
yeah.
Sarah Kodolov or something.
Yeah, and they had pre-selected Garanichev, and they had pre-selected guy with the huge sight risers. Can't remember his name right now. Super professional. Anyway, they pre-selected those two guys, and then they immediately had terrible races and got bounced to the IU Cup the next weekend. So I think just all across the board, if you're willing to pay attention and invest, the Russian week-to-week selection and relay selection is just an excellent Nordic sports soap opera.
Was that Povarnitsin, Raleigh, who didn't race?
Yes, it was Povarnitsin. Yeah,
he is a fascinating figure because he's one of these guys where I've seen him win IBU Cups and then he's just gone. He doesn't get called up to the World Cup. He's not even named to the next week of IBU Cup racing. Yeah, and in fact, I wonder if before this year, if his most recent IBU Cup may have been even been a podium back in 2019 or something like that.
Yeah, it's really wild. And I think that, Eric Lesser, like 2 years ago, famously went down and raced an IBU Cup weekend, and he got like fifth and got beat by two Russians. And he was like, man, if the Russians ever started their best guys on the World Cup, they'd be a lot more competitive, So I think, yeah, they don't know who their best people are. And it's a problem where they just have so much talent. They have so many people to choose from. So many different training plans, people going up and down at the same time or at different times. And I'm just glad I'm not a Russian selector. The other crazy thing, as long as we're talking about Russia, is that I got interviewed last week by a journalist that was here doing the classic, what is biathlon? It's an Olympic year thing. And they asked me about, in the US, biathlon's a smaller sport, there's not as many resources. I'm like, yeah, this is all true. And we've, cross country and biathlon haven't been as successful, especially on the men's side. But if I mess up, in a relay, they're not talking about on SportsCenter to be like, we need to send Raleigh Gessling home. Raleigh Gessling had a penalty. We got to get Luke Brown in there. He didn't have any penalties last year. I'm not getting raked across the coals on sports radio, because I got out sprinted for a podium. And I think that that's something when you watch the World Cup, if you are sort of aware of this other layer of public scrutiny and investment in the Scandinavian countries, and especially in Russia, those last stages and misses, just you can really feel for those guys and those women when that happens, because you know that there's the immediate repercussions from the race, but it's almost, you're just oh no, you might just be going back to St. Petersburg and racing Russia Cups and just never gonna be seen again.
Raleigh, do you think that the politics kind of almost get in the way of Russia from starting their best talent?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But at the same time, their athletes have unbelievable records, they all have podiums. And there's no reason to think that, the people that have done it before can't do it again. And so, like I said, it puts the selectors in a really difficult position.
Seems like
It
we need
makes it-
an in-depth documentary, like inside look at Russian selection.
Yeah,
Maybe
I don't know.
special episode, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we could do a deep investigative dive.
I'll get my conspiracy board out and we can really get it going.
Conspiracy board, and Jake can talk to Loganov at some point.
Perfect. Yeah,
Only in the sauna. We'll have a podcast from the sauna with Loganoff.
perfect.
That sounds great. Something that's popping into my head that I wanted to get your guys' opinions on was specifically in regards to like relay order and how teams might think about and select who goes first, second, third, fourth in a relay, both on the biathlon side of things and on the cross country side of things. If there's any difference there, I mean, what stands out in my mind from this weekend, I know Christensen has been the anchor on the Norwegian team a lot. And he's seems to be a really good like clutch shooter, and they put Johannes Bo third. And then looking at the U.S. women's team, who had a really strong result. I mean, obviously, like they talk a lot about wanting podiums and like are fighting for podiums a lot. On the other hand, they were like in a pack with 4th through 6th or 7th for a lot of the end. And I was really impressed with Julia Kern, who anchored that team, who I haven't seen anchor that team before. And I was impressed by, I mean, she's a good sprinter and she did her job there and got 4th. And just thinking about if we were 20 seconds in front, she would have been with ahead, we would have been with the leaders, and maybe she could do that sort of tactical sprint job for a podium spot soon or at the Olympics or something like that.
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think that was a sweet race by Julia. I was lucky enough to watch it live, waiting for our races to start that day. And in that pack, that 4th through maybe 7th pack, like you were saying, Luke, Victoria Karl from Germany went and tried to catch Bridge and catch that 1, 2, 3 pack early. And I was really impressed that Julia didn't go with her. You know, she stayed within herself and skied her race. And sure enough, Karl came back at the end, kind of paid for that effort. And Julia was able to, you know, race really tactically, and really I also was really impressed just with the entire team in that race. So I think hats off to the US women for that race, from my opinion. I think the whole biathlon relay order is really interesting to me, especially coming from the cross country side, just like most of us did, or at least you and I, Luke, how we're so used to, okay, yeah, you put your best person last usually, right? And you put someone who's a good scrambler first and can get out strong. And, you know, maybe there's sometimes some different tactics depending on what other teams are doing. But in biathlon, it seems like most teams are putting someone who can shoot really fast, really efficiently in the first leg, and maybe someone who's a little slower skier because they seem like they can get a little bit of a free ride on that leg. But then the second and third legs seem to be really key, because especially for the smaller nations, because they're trying to hang with the larger nations, especially in a course like Ostersund where the big gaps tend to form. Hochfilzen, I think, will be a little bit different this next weekend because it tends to be a much faster relay. And you tend to have a lot of teams within, you know, even 2 minutes. I think last year there were 15 teams within 2.5 minutes. This last weekend, you know, I think our team was 12th and we were like 340 back or something. So when those bigger gaps form, I think it's really important that teams that are maybe not as important have faster guys in the middle. I don't know what you guys think about that, Kelsey and Raleigh, thinking about relay order. But that's kind of what's usually in my head when we're thinking about discussing relay order with our team.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to approach a relay, and it comes from the position that you're in relative as a smaller nation. Are you just trying to hang on, or can you hang on but play it smart and not just like have your top person go? Because I feel like the like base model of a relay for a small nation is that you just like start with your fastest person and then go from there. At least that's what the US did for a long time, because they, didn't want to get lapped or didn't want to do that. But I think even as being a smaller nation, I think that you can play things a little bit. You can play to different strengths and have it be less of, you can find different ways to hang on is what I'm trying to say. Like you were saying.
Yeah.
I think putting someone who can shoot in biathlon, putting someone who can who is really secure with the rifle early is a really good strategy. And like Jake mentioned, in most relays, usually the first lap is not as taxing on the first leg because it's in a big pack. And either the pace is slow or you can kind of sit in and just kind of get towed along, and the rest of the field will show you the pace. And even in cross country and biathlon, it seems like putting some of your strongest people third, that is if you don't have four really outstanding people, makes sense because that is where, you know, you can break up the field, right? And then I think for the last leg, you want to have someone who you can put in a position to succeed, right? Who is maybe not capable of creating an advantage, but is capable of hanging onto the top people and on a good day finishing on the podium. And I think that when the coaches are crafting these relays, I think a lot of them, especially for the bigger nations, look at it as like, where can we create an advantage and where do we have to be stable, right? And it's also sort of a question of like, are you betting on, you know, your person doing well, or are you betting on other people to make a mistake, right? And so I think that when you look at like the Norwegian men's team, when they have Christensen go last, for me, I feel like Christensen is least likely to make a catastrophic mistake on that last leg, you know, as far as like being a really stable standing shooter. And you know, he's their closer guy, as far as like who, if you could, you know, pull anyone to like close 5 standing targets on the last leg of something, you know, he's right up there on the list.
He's also in yellow now, so he is a pretty good biathlete in his own right.
Yeah, but I'm saying that, like, you know, at the other things aside, right? Like I feel like that's a lot of what they're selecting for. And I think you see that too in cross country, where it's like, okay, you know, we have the Norwegian women, you know, they have Joha go third, right? And I think that their thinking is like, okay, if they're the most impactful way this is going to happen is if Joha, you know, brute forces this third leg and then puts Falsenholm in a position to succeed, right? And it will be really interesting to see, like Jake just said, you know, Christensen for the biathlon men is in yellow right now. He's skiing very well. Are they going to move him, or they're like, okay, maybe Christensen can create an advantage, and like, you know, JT Bow or someone else, they might just be in the hang on mode. Jake's shaking his head if you're listening on the podcast and you're not seeing us talk. I also think that won't happen, but I could see where, you know, the Norwegian coaches are thinking that over.
Jake,
yeah, I mean, it would at least be like go through that thought process, right? These are like the things they would be thinking about, not necessarily the things they would like be acting on for sure. Switching gears, we're kind of bouncing around here, but I did want to highlight Rosie Brennan's third in the 10K skate, only 11 seconds back. I thought that was super impressive, and something for me that was just really cool to see, especially after last year. I mean, Rosie had so many good results, but honestly, like I was still a bit skeptical just because nations were sitting out races for COVID. I wasn't sure how competitive the fields were. And this like sealed it in my mind. Not that she's always going to be there. I think she has the potential to be there a lot and throughout the rest of the season, especially after this race. I mean, she's a great skater. This could be her event. But yeah, to be only 11 seconds back in third in what is going to be like the level of competitiveness in this year, like that was awesome for me. So I just want to highlight that.
Absolutely. I mean, you can kind of see the seeds of that getting sown in the sprint race, where she was super, super strong and maybe just didn't have the top speed. If anyone watched the sprint race, there's in Lillehammer. It's mostly downhill, technical corners, and then mostly uphill, flat, big 90-degree right-hand turn in the finish. And in the Brennan's heats that I watched, she was really smart, sat in on the downhill, and seemed to have a lot of really good power, a lot of really good speed. She V2'd a lot of sections that other people V1'd. and just didn't have that sprint velocity at the very, very end. And when you have that fitness, and you take it to an individual start scenario, and there's no one in your way, you can kind of do your own thing. The results speak for themselves. So hopefully, she can carry this on, and as there's more racing, especially more top speed in the international sprint competitions, she'll be able to pad out her all around resume.
Yeah.
I would be curious, because you guys realize that they held those races on the biathlon side of the venue, not on the normal cross country trails, which are like very steep. The biathlon trails are much more, a lot of transitions. The climbs aren't as steep, and there's a lot of turns. I talked to Caitlin Patterson about it a little bit, and she said, I think it was maybe a snow issue, but I think it changed probably the dynamic of who would succeed in those races, and not because it's like easier per se, but just because the skiing was quite different. And I don't know if any of you had thoughts on that.
I think that's an awesome point, Kelsey. And I was wondering that the whole time. I didn't know that, but obviously we've all seen the iconic like giant hill in Lillehammer, and I was like, where is this? And so that makes a lot of sense. I also wonder the same thing. I think that's a great point. I also was really stoked about the Rosie thing, Luke, and to see only 11 seconds back too. I mean, that's really legit. There are some races where we see, Johaug win these things by like a minute. So I still think, I don't know. I've never skied that venue. Maybe you have, Kelsey, Lillehammer for biathlon. But yeah, I mean, that A climb still looked quite substantial. You saw in that relay, Fossenholm made a move up that A climb, and it seemed to take it quite out of her, just like maybe that hill would in the cross country side. I don't know. It still seems like it was difficult, definitely different, but.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, of course, that's just super transition, like has a lot of transitions, and there isn't like large downhill recoveries like there is on the other side of the Lillehammer courses. I mean, can also be very challenging. And I wonder though, thinking about Rosie and like her power in the V2, and because there was so much of that course really favored being able to stay in V2 and be really punchy, and then sustain on that climb. I wonder if that really played to her strengths right now.
And this is where I want to talk about the course in Beijing, but I don't think we know, right? Does anyone know? No one knows.
Isn't there a course profile at least?
Is it flat?
I know nothing about the cross country course. It's two totally separate venues, I think, across the street from each other. So I've seen the course preview for biathlon. It's very V2 heavy, very gradual.
Okay.
I know nothing about the cross country side.
The Google Translate.
I think they were designed totally independently.
Yeah, the Google Translate gossip for the cross country courses is that the hills are not that steep, but they are quite long.
Okay.
And it's at high altitude. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of that sort of like short, quick, have to pour it all on. It's a real kind of grind it out, stay consistent, keep the speed going, which Brennan seems to have a competency for.
So are you telling me that John Morton didn't design these courses?
I mean, I don't know how many twists and turns there are in the gradual uphill, or whether it's like canted one way and then halfway through the trail like cants the other way. So it's still possible that he designed them. It's just unclear how many of his little artistic flares made it in.
Okay.
I do think like that where the pitch of a hill of where someone has to be V1 or V2 is really important. And I think for me, that was the biggest difference. And I wonder if it'll play in Beijing, that like those hills in Lillehammer, the cross country side are like the A climb on the biathlon side is still really hard, but on the cross country side, each of the hills you have to like V1. So it's just a different gear. Anyway.
Does somebody know what the team sprint in the Olympics is for cross country? Is it classic or skate? Would it be classic? Okay. This is just making me think. What is the U.S.
Got to be classic, right?
Yeah, I guess.
2018.
Yeah. What is the U.S. Team's women's team going to be? I mean, we're the defending champs, so I mean, based on the classic qualifier, I mean, Jessie won that, so I'd assume it's her and somebody else. But we don't have Keegan, we don't have Sophie or Sadie, so it'll be interesting to see who gets that other spot.
I think Sweden's going to be really strong in that event. They're going to be definitely the team to beat, despite us being the defending champions for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, Sweden always brings it for the Olympic years. It's always interesting to see how they as a nation, bring it when it's really important. They're not always winning all the World Cups, or I think it's difficult for even some of the smaller nations to kind of have maximum resources and maximum focus every single year for world championships. But that's what makes these Olympic years so fun, is that everyone gets that little bit of extra media attention at home, gets a little bit of extra funding, and invest that little extra bit in material and prep, and then you kind of see a little bit of a shadow of a world where, like, oh, if everyone had a similar budget, maybe this would be a lot tighter.
That's an interesting take, Raleigh. I haven't thought of it that way. I guess I always thought just Sweden had something special in terms of preparing for championships.
Which I'm not saying that they don't, but I'm saying that in Olympic years, I think everyone gets something special. And I think that's part of why the racing is so tight this year. And you see sort of different nations coming to the fore. And just because of that, in Olympic years, there's more investment from nations, from sponsors. There's more attention, and it just money matters. At the end of the day, it's still pro sports.
Yeah.
Hey, Luke.
Yeah.
It seems like we've kind of been beating around it for a bit, but I do want to make sure we mention that women's relay. Norway had won every World Cup relay for the last 10 years. Did you guys read that?
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
Russia breaks the streak.
You mentioned, putting Johaug third as that tactic to gain that separation, and she couldn't get away this time. She handed off right with the pack. And Frida was even second leg, right? It wasn't Frida hanging with Johaug. Who was it for Sweden on the Sweden? I think it was maybe Serena for the Russians, but I can't remember for Sweden. But I'm a big Fossenholm fan. I was hoping she was going to do it. I don't know if they missed the skis. It seemed like she had a gap at the top of the hill, and the other girls, both the Swede, it looked like was going to take it for a while, and then obviously Russia, and it was super exciting to watch.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so the third leg for Russia was Serena, Sweden was Ebba Andersson, and Norway was Therese Johaug. Yeah.
I think Ebba is still coming into form, so I think we'll see more from her later this year. She tends to get better as the racing goes on. So
yeah, and I think this is the discussion that every coach, athlete, pundit, podcaster is having with themselves, is that it's like, who's really in shape right now, right? Like, are people, how focused are people on February? How focused are people on securing qualification? What's everyone's priority? Every national team is going to have to do a training block before February. When are they doing it? It's all different tactics. And I think it'll be fun to see how that affects each World Cup week.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting theme to watch going forward. So we're wrapping up here soon. Does anyone have any other thoughts that they wanted to make sure to share before we finish?
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the Nordic men on the U.S. side, because JC Shoemaker had another awesome sprint. That's 2 times now that he's been up there in the semis, right? So awesome job to him. And I think seeing the USA number one having 3 guys born in 2000 and 1 guy born in 2001. Looking at the results, that was pretty wild. So a solid, I think, 9th place to them, considering that you do have those double teams in there on the Nordic side. So that was promising to see, and I didn't want to gloss over that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched JC's heats, and he looks like he belongs. He looks like he belongs technically. He looks like he belongs fitness wise. He has the top speed. He's not getting blown out. He's not letting the races manage him. You can tell that he's got a tactic and he's executing, and he was very, very close to getting to advancing. And I think that group of young men is representing the US incredibly well. And it's exciting to see what they're going to be able to keep accomplishing. Because I feel like they have a great team spirit that they built through the junior and the U23 classifications. And they have had success there. And, this is interesting to see, especially because the US had for a while in like Newell and Hamilton guys that could qualify really well and that could occasionally do it in the heats. But even early days, these guys are showing that they are completely deserving of that US men's sprinting legacy.
Yeah, hot take. I'm much more confident watching JC race a semi or a heat in general than I am, say, watching Newell in his prime after qualifying first. So it's like you said, it looks like he belongs, just that final corner. And it's just a matter of time before he or Ben or Luke are in a final here. We've seen Gus moving up the ranks in distance, and I think he and Zand and the other guys are only going to get better. So it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. It's about time.
Yeah, for sure. We've got momentum. Let's keep it as a nation. It's awesome. Awesome to watch. Makes it more fun. Something to root for. On the guys' side, I mean, we've had the women's team coming on really strong, obviously, in the last chunk of years, and that's been cool to watch, and undoubtedly has influenced those younger guys, it seems like. Sweet. Well, thanks for all you guys' thoughts, your reflections, and we'll look forward to another race weekend here coming up soon to watch, and we'll reconvene to reflect on it next week.
Thanks, Luke.
So it's Luke, it's what, Davos for the skiers, yeah?
Yeah, Davos for the skiers and Hochfilzen for biathlon. Right. I think that's where you are.
That's where we are.
Nice. Just want to make sure you got to the right place.
I appreciate that. And hey, great snow in Central Europe. I imagine it's the same thing in Switzerland, which is a rarity. So I think everyone will enjoy that.
Yeah, and before we totally wrap up, we should do a quick shout out to our GRP teammates on the Super Tour, pulling down some podiums this weekend, packing up top 6, top 11, top 12, top 13 places. And also just nice to have the Super Tour back. Some racing in North American time zone. So maybe in the future we do a little Super Tour wrap up when we have a little bit more racing to talk about, and we can play everyone's favorite game. Which is better, a Super Tour win or 49th place on the Cross Country World Cup? We'll just have to wait and see.
All right. Well, there
so Alex lost in second, right? Adam Martin third. Those are our podiums for the weekend. So that was
exactly
really cool.
Yep.
Go Sprigs.
Go Sprigs.
Go Green Team. All right, guys. Thanks. See you next week.